Hello there and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the USS Missouri, and for my demonstration purposes I have this little Metal Earth model that I'm going to use and point to different locations on it. And just because I wanted to give some information on it, kind of my own personal little summary of the ship and the information that I've learned about it, which is actually basically a conglomeration of information I've learned from both visiting the USS Iowa in person and actually visiting the USS Missouri in person, which is where I got this model from. I'm sure you can find it online, but I got mine on location from the USS Missouri. So when I went to the Missouri, the thing that I really wanted to see that I knew that they had was in the deck they have a plaque. And that plaque is on location, on the spot of the deck, pretty much probably within a couple feet of where the table was set up in 1945 when Japan surrendered on the ship. So that plaque is roughly here on the ship. Now this model is set up to show you the 1940s World War II setup of the ship. So in the 1940s, when this ship was seeing combat, you had all these 40 millimeters emplacements. You had all these 50 caliber emplacements that got removed because the ship was modernized in the 1980s and it served in the Gulf War, which at that point we had the Sea-Whiz phalanx cannons and we had Tomahawk missiles. And so in the present day, some of this stuff is missing from the ship, so like the 40 millimeter emplacements are no longer there, and they actually did also remove a couple of the 5-inch gun emplacements as well. It still retains a few of them, it just doesn't have the same number, it has fewer than it did. But back to the plaque, so roughly right here on the deck, just behind turret number 2, and this would be on the, I believe it's called the starboard side of the ship, there's a little plaque in the floor that basically says, on this place, on this date in 1945, the Japanese Imperial Army surrendered to the Allies. And for that, so if you go to the Missouri, they have pictures everywhere. They have all sorts of documentation and everything that shows you how that all went down. So probably the most famous picture is, there's one kind of a side shot of the table. You have all the men in the background, and from the picture's perspective, on the left side you had General Douglas MacArthur, who he had his little speech that he said, and he's standing in front of the microphone. It's kind of right after that moment. And then on the other side of the table you have the Japanese delegation. Most all of them didn't speak English. There was one guy in that group who did speak English, and he was kind of the interpreter for the whole ordeal. And so for me, that was kind of like the big thing I wanted to see on the Missouri, was kind of where the whole thing ended. Because granted, yes, you had VE Day, which was Victory in Europe Day, and that was when Germany surrendered, but World War II technically was still going on. So on this ship was where World War II as a whole came to a close. So it, for me, bears a huge amount of importance in World War II history, and it's just a really cool thing to see on this ship. But besides that, the ship in and of itself, even when you go to, say, the Iowa or the New Jersey or the Wisconsin, if you visit any of the USS Iowa class battleships, they are breathtaking ships. They're huge. Just everything about them is massive. They're the current biggest guns on the planet that you can still go see. The biggest guns, period, were the battleship Yamato, but sadly, kind of bottom of the ocean, you can't go see those. You can go to Japan and see a scale model of it, but these ships you can actually go see, and they're currently still the biggest guns that you can go see physically. So the way that these ships were set up, they were designed in the 1930s with the intention of combating whatever we could foresee at the time of what Japan was putting out. Which, mind you, though, at the time we didn't know about the Yamato and that whole class of ship. But we were designing these in the 1930s. They were built in the 1940s. Thankfully, they primarily saw action just as beach bombardment. They didn't see, to my knowledge, I cannot recall a time where the Iowa class ships specifically fired shells at another battleship, at least another battleship of significance, like the Yamato or the Tirpitz or the Bismarck, some of these other big name battleships that were feared at the time. But, so like I said, designed in 1930, their gun design is they carry 9 16-inch guns in 50 caliber designation, and on ships with these guns, the caliber, everybody knows, 50 caliber, they immediately go to, the Barrett 50 cal sniper or the M2HB, these machine guns. But for a ship with the main guns, the caliber is actually referring to the length of the barrel, from what if I recall correctly. That is what it's referring to. But it was 9 16-inch guns and 3 turrets in triple gun layout, and each turret was pretty much not self-sufficient, but self-contained from the next turret. So each turret had its own, magazine beneath it. It had its own rotation mechanisms and all that sort of stuff. And each of these turrets, so when you're looking at the ship, you only get to actually see the top portion of the turret, but the turrets actually go pretty much to the bottom of the ship. And towards the bottom is where they keep all the gunpowder and the shells, because you don't want these things near the top, because if they're closer to the top, it's easier to cause damage to the magazine and blow it up, and you don't want that. So you put it towards the bottom, and between all the gunpowder and the shells, you have the rotation mechanism. It's multiple stories. It takes like 100 men to man one turret. It's really, really impressive stuff, even by today's standards, how these ships work. But each gun, they had essentially not an elevator, but they had a mechanism to bring gunpowder up from below and the shell. And it's actually kind of similar to, if you've ever seen the auto loader system on a T-72, T-80, T-90 tank, the way it brings the shell up from the carousel, it's actually a semi-similar system in visual aspect, not in terms of how it operates, but just visually. It looks kind of somewhat similar, because you have the shell come up from a tube and then it kind of lays it down on a track, and then they have a little mechanized rammer that shoves it in, and then they have another little door that opens up, and 3 bags of gunpowder will roll out. They push those in. It opens up again. Another 3 come out, and they push those in, because the standard gunpowder setup for these guns was 6 bags of 110-pound gunpowder bags. So total of 660 pounds of gunpowder sitting behind a 2,700-pound shell. So, which, ironically, I have a infographic from the USS Iowa that actually describes the shells as being equivalent in weight to a Willys Jeep with driver and passenger sitting in it. So the self-described weight metaphor here is you're slinging a Jeep with driver and passenger at your enemies from roughly 20 miles away. And these shells could, at least on a beach, create a 50-foot wide and 20-foot deep crater. So not small munitions. And even still, yes, we have missiles, we have bombs that can do way more damage. But in terms of a gun where you have a powder charge behind and basically an unguided shell, because the shells that this fired were pretty much all unguided except for the aiming, but firing something that far with precision accuracy is very impressive, especially given at 20 miles you have to account for curvature of the earth. Even though these are big shells, I would imagine you still have to account for, humidity, wind, temperature, all sorts of stuff just to get your shell 20 miles out to range. And that's not the exact distance. I think it's a little bit more than that if they really stretched it. But roughly that's in that range, in the 20-mile range, which the aiming system for these is it's a mechanical computer, essentially. So it's I actually haven't gotten to see the inside of the system, so I can't describe how exactly it works, but it was so well designed that when they did the modernization of this ship, they decided, you know what, let's not switch out the aiming system for the main guns, because the mechanical computers that it had it was already so accurate that they were like, yes, our computer systems are more accurate than this mechanical computer, but not to such a degree that it justifies us swapping out the whole thing, especially when you think about you can't hack or EMP a mechanical computer. So even if the ship took an EMP hit or the electronics got hacked, you could still fire your main guns, you're still lethal, you're still effective. So that's, to me, very, very impressive, especially when you consider designed in 1930. So that means draft board with a pencil and rulers and everything, and just going through, sketching it all out by hand, and then, going through hand machining the parts. And I mean, welding hasn't changed a whole lot. I know we have robotic welding, but for something of this size, I don't know how much robotic welding would have really helped. But even compared to modern day manufacturing methods, being able to design and build something so precisely and of such size and scale is extremely impressive. And even you think about this ship weighed 57,500 tons in full combat displacement, yet it was able to reach a speed roughly, and again, it depends on what source you look at, but it's somewhere around 32 to 33 knots, which is roughly right around 37 miles an hour. So you think about 57,500 tons is several million pounds. So you have several million pounds of metal moving through water, which is greater resistance than air or driving a car on land, and yet you have a ship that can do 37 miles an hour in the water. Granted, to do that, it had 4 turbines, which produced 212,000 shaft horsepower, so not a slacker in the horsepower numbers either. And no, I don't think you could fit those 4 boilers in your Honda Civic. But again, I mean, just everything about these ships and just this whole class of ship is extremely impressive. Okay. So, like I said, very impressive with how they're built, even to the point of towards the end of World War II, when Japan the tables, by this point in time, tables have very heavily turned in the Allies' favor. Japan is losing. They've lost much of their Air Force, much of their Navy. For lack of a better metaphor, they've been kneecapped at this point. They've turned to Kamikaze attacks, which is load a plane up with explosives and send it out, and it's 1940s equivalent to a guided missile or guided rocket or bomb or whatever. But the guidance system just happens to be a human pilot inside of the plane, and they would not bail out. It wasn't okay, I've pointed the plane at the ship, now I'm going to bail out. No, they went down with it. They were very proud people, very bound by honor, and you're doing this for your homeland. When you die while you're doing this, you're gaining all sorts of honor for yourself. So very, very driven to do these attacks. I mean, they, it wasn't like they were struggling to find volunteers. They were able to sling thousands of these planes at us. And the Missouri, or the Mighty Mo, as many people knew her, or Big Mo, many nicknames, but she did come under attack from a kamikaze, which actually, to show where this happened, I'll flip the model around. So on the port side of the ship, if you go and visit the ship in person, you'll see one of the things that they will point out to you, the tour guides, is a dent somewhere right along here on the hull, where a kamikaze was coming in. It was damaged. The pilot managed to regain just enough control to pull it back up and gain just enough time to hit the ship. He didn't do much damage to it at all. In fact, none besides a dent in the ship, which is still there to this day. But the plane, when it hit, its left wing collided first, and the impact of that kind of slung the plane up and over, and it crashed along this whole side of the ship and just slew plane parts everywhere and killed the pilot instantly. But the reason I'm drawing attention to this specific story, one of the most famous pictures that you'll ever see of a kamikaze attack is a picture taken somewhere up on one of these upper decks, looking down over in roughly this direction, and the plane coming in towards, very, very low over the water. Like I said, the left wing collided with the hull. But about right before he crashed, the wing wasn't even touching the ship yet. The plane was probably right around here visually, but probably one of the most famous pictures of a kamikaze attack was actually taken from the Missouri, and it was this attack that picture is from. And the reason this also, to me, besides the whole surrender on the Missouri, the reason this bears so much significance is the unprecedented reaction from the captain afterward. The crew was cleaning up the ship. They were, getting the plane parts back in the water, and they were planning on just kind of unceremoniously just tossing the pilot overboard and just leaving it at that. But the captain stopped them, and he told them, no, we're going to do a full ceremonial, full military honors burial for this pilot. And granted, I'm sure, as you can imagine, a lot of the crew did not like this, and especially because, not just because Japan was our enemy, but they bombed, everybody. It was kind of like the 1940s equivalent to Remember the Alamo. It was Remember Pearl Harbor. A lot of these men hated the Japanese, just like a lot of the Japanese servicemen hated us. So they did not like this whole idea of giving full military honors like we would do for any of our servicemen to this kamikaze pilot. But they did it anyway because that was the captain's wish. And the night before the burial, and at least this is my recollection of what I was told on the ship from the people, this information has been passed down from generation to generation. They spent the night cutting up their, the little flags that'd be hanging down from the masts, their communication flags. They cut up some of these flags and they re-sewed them together into a extremely accurate, darn near perfect Land of the Rising Sun flag. So the whole red circle in the middle with the radiating beams going out from it. And they gave this man a full ceremonial burial. So they had the whole firing the guns the 3 times, the chaplain, the playing taps, everything, full, to what the standard was. And as an outsider peering through the window of history, that's extremely inspiring. Of this pilot was the enemy of this ship. He died trying to take down this ship. Yet the kind of man that the captain was, to sit there and go, no, we're still, even though he hated us and we hated him, we're going to give this man a full ceremonial burial at sea. And it actually, later on, the family of that pilot was able to find out, like, the captain and the ship that it was done with, and, like, if you go there, they have a whole, as you go through, because it's now a museum ship, they have a little section that talks about this whole incident inside, and they have, I believe it's artifacts from the family of the pilot, including pictures from when he was younger, like when he was a kid, and all this sorts of stuff, because they were like, hey, you honored our son, we want this to always be remembered, and we want there to be the proof of, like, this is who the pilot was, since you've given him this great honor. So, I mean, just goes to show, you know, giving honor to someone, even if you dislike them, is extremely, extremely awesome, and, I mean, looked well upon by a great many people. But, and even actually, and I would also like to, off of this, go back a little bit to the surrender. Something I just remembered is another fun fact. So, if for those of you who recall from your history courses, I know they teach this in pretty much every high school level history course here in the U.S. They'll teach you about, FDR died on this day, and then Harry Truman became president. So before the surrender happened, and when FDR was still alive, FDR really liked the USS Iowa, the namesake of the ship class. And he actually had spent a lot of time on the USS Iowa. If you go and visit it, they still have the quarters that he would have been in done up, like how it would have been when he was in there. And they even have like a little, as you go around, they talk about there was a dog on the ship, and the dog spent, whenever FDR was on that ship, that dog was with him. And so FDR loved Iowa. And so originally, because of that, Iowa was going to be the ship that the surrender took place on. But because of his passing, and then Truman becoming president, and Truman was born in Missouri, the honor ended up falling to Missouri. Even the thing I will say though, as cool as it would have been for it to be on the Iowa, it's, they're all identical ships. It's still a great honor to, any ship to get to see the surrender of Japan, and to have that forever marked and remembered on the ship. And even I'll go back, and I need to look through my photos, but I have photos they have plaques and stuff that note down some of what was said, and kind of the timing of what happened. Like there's a plaque that kind of tells you minute by minute what happened. So it tells you like, okay, at this time Douglas MacArthur was talking, and then at this time the Japanese signed, and then at this time MacArthur signed, and then by this time it was completely done. It was over with. But I will, side note, I'll need to cut that in. Cut to like me showing those pictures and talking about it. But, so for now, those are all the things I can remember off the top of my head for this ship. Just World War II history in general is highly, highly intriguing to me, but primarily especially when it comes to the warships, the tanks, the warplanes that were used, and then some of the very significant events, and kind of looking at some of the details that are not really paid attention to all that much in those events. Because even though everybody knows about the surrender of Japan, and they know it took place on the Missouri, kind of looking at some of the surrounding details of, who was there, like it actually in the like I was talking about the picture, probably the primary most famous picture of the surrender, like I was talking about, with you have Douglas MacArthur and then the Japanese. Behind Douglas MacArthur were two generals who were POWs under the Japanese up until the surrender, And so they were there because it was kind of a like, you know, we're also kind of like representing the POWs. And mind you, like, you could kind of tell that they were POWs because they were extremely skinny. Like, you could kind of tell based on their necks, like they were skin and bone because of how they were treated. So details like that are some of the stuff that I really enjoy. But in closing, since I know this is my first video, the thing I wanted to talk about just real quick, kind of give everybody an introduction to the channel as a whole and share, you know, my desire and dream for what this will be, is, especially given the name, is yes, I will talk history, you know, interesting facts and did you knows series, kind of like that, and just general kind of sit-in chats like this, talking about cool ships. I have another video planned. I'm going to talk about the USS Arizona. I have another model like this one that I need to assemble. And for this one, I have some footage that, you know, I can show you. For that one, I'll take some recording. But, you know, so the history will be one aspect of it, of course, because the namesake. I will talk Star Wars at some point. But my main thing that I want to do, my dream for the channel, is to talk cars, and that's why it's Obi-Wan Car Nobi. Is I love cars. They're my passion, but specifically the thing that I'm looking to do is that I haven't really seen other channels focus on. There's some videos here and there that kind of do it, but I haven't seen anyone really dedicated to this. I'm gonna do a series on, here's a price point and a car type, and based on that criteria, okay, so I want to talk about, you know, here's the 3 new cars you can get in that price point in that category, and then here's 3 new used cars you can get in that price point and category, and kind of just work my way through price points and categories until I've covered almost everything. And then of course kind of over the years refreshing and updating, you know, with new information as new cars come out. But and of course besides that, I will do car reviews. You know, I've been thinking of, I want to do a video on even you know, how to do an oil change on your car, just kind of, or just talking engine oil in general, because I do have some knowledge from a man that who mentored me that I'd like to share. So yeah, I wanted to share that with you guys, and hope, you know, I do hope and dream that this channel can grow into something that people find informative, and as I get more and more comfortable, I, you know, try to work some humor in there. You know, I know it's easier for people to digest when you're funny, so definitely will work on my funny and get those funny juices flowing in future videos. But for now, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about on this ship. And if you like the content that you've seen today and you'd like to see more content, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the bell so that you'll always stay up to date on all the videos that I'm putting out. And of course, leave a like and a comment. It would really help, you know, get engagement up on the videos, because I love, you know, sharing the knowledge and information that I've learned, especially stuff on, you know, World War II history. I know a lot of World War II history has kind of been lost, except for the nerds like myself. But this kind of stuff that I'm talking about is, you're not really going to find it in your, you know, Common Core history books. Like, they cover a lot of the general stuff, but if you want to learn more, it's either in books or from a video like what I'm putting out. But I do this because I want other people to be excited in this as much as I am. I love learning about these kinds of things, these ships. So, and of course with cars and Star Wars, you know, sharing my enthusiasm and passion there too. And so, and of course, you know, if any of you have suggestions or ideas or something you'd like to see, please again leave a comment. Let me know what you'd like to see, and I'll, of course, I will give it genuine consideration. I'll look through as many comments as I can and give consideration to your ideas. So, as always, have a great day and stay safe. Thank you for watching.